I'll tell you the story of Ngolo, who was a patient of mine in East Africa some years ago. And she was quite typical. She was living in a remote village in southern Tanzania, miles from any sort of medical infrastructure or help or midwives or doctors. So Ngolo grew up in a little village. She was married at, she doesn't know the age, but probably about the age of 15, and soon after became pregnant. She did what all the women in her village did, and she went in labour in her mother-in-law's house and tried to deliver her baby. After a full day of labour, she still hadn't delivered her child. She'd got into what's called obstructed labour, and this is the medical part of the talk, John.
Yeah.
I actually gave this talk to a boys' school just recently, and this part of the talk, one of the boys fainted. And so I asked the teachers, oh, should I turn it down? They said, oh, don't worry, he fainted in sex ed class, so you're all right. So, but I'll give you that explanation. Obstructed labour means that the baby's just getting stuck in labour. So if this is the mother's pelvis, baby's head, it's getting stuck. There's a mismatch. Either the pelvis is too small, head's too big, or maybe the baby's coming out the wrong way, it's getting stuck. So this happened to Ngolo, as it does to many women in Australia as well. But for Ngolo, she couldn't get to a hospital, she couldn't have a caesarean, an operation, so she stayed in labour. Another full day passed, and after 2 days of labour, she still hadn't delivered her child. The husband was beside himself. He knew that she should have delivered by now, but didn't know how to help. He was illiterate, he'd never been to school, but he had the idea that if he boiled some water and put her feet into the boiling water, that might stimulate her uterus to contract. He did this for 2 more days, and after 4 days of labour, she still hadn't delivered her child. She was now unconscious, and unconscious on the 5th day of labour, she delivered a dead or stillborn child. It took her 2 days to regain consciousness, and when she did regain consciousness, she found that she was leaking uncontrollably from her bladder and also her bowel. Because she'd been in labour for so long, the baby's head had been pressed against the bones of her pelvis, so all the tissues between bladder, birth canal, rectum, birth canal, all had its blood supply cut off, so those tissues died. So after she delivered her stillborn child, all those dead tissues came away and she was left with a big fistula, or a hole between bladder, outside world, rectum, outside world. So she was leaking continually. She smelt. She was ashamed. Husband divorced her. She went back to live with her mother. The mother couldn't keep her inside the house because she smelt so badly. She was too ashamed to go to church or to the community. So she locked herself away in a little hut. And unable to walk because of burns on her feet, she stayed in that hut for 18 months. After 18 months, she was found by a mission and taken to a hospital about 100 kilometres away. They tried to help her. They operated on her 3 times, but she couldn't be cured because they hadn't been trained in this fistula surgery, it's called. She was then found by our outreach workers and brought to us in northern Tanzania, a huge 2-day journey for her to come to us. And we operate on our patients with a spinal anaesthetic, so they're awake during the operation. It's a very safe anaesthetic. But Ngolo, as we operated, had so given up hope that she could ever be cured that she just sobbed uncontrollably throughout the operation. We operated. She had a 2-week recovery period in the hospital with all the other fistula patients. So she came, she was very demure, she barely looked at anyone in the face, she was depressed. But in that 2-week recovery period, she started to interact with all the other patients, started to smile, started to laugh. She saw the catheters come out of the other patients and saw one by one that they were dry and cured. And then it came for her day to have the catheter out, and she was thankfully cured, just rejoicing, giving thanks to God, clapping her hands, jumping and dancing, just giving thanks to God that her dignity was restored. And she said to me as she was leaving, look, I'm going to go home. I'm never going to get married again. I'm never going to meet another man. I'm going to study and become a midwife and help women just like me. So she went home. I caught up with her a couple of years later, and she was going to school back in her village. And who knows, in a few years' time, maybe she will be a midwife and help women just like her. So that's the experience of having a fistula is absolutely awful. Women have been getting fistulas ever since they first started to deliver babies. There's records of fistulas way back in ancient Egyptian times. Actually, the world's first fistula hospital was built in New York in 1855. We've eradicated them now, and so that first fistula hospital is now closed because there's no business for that in America anymore. But there's still a great need for care for these women, and we think there's about 2 million fistula patients still waiting for treatment around the world, most of them in sub-Saharan Africa. So there's still a great deal of work to do, but there's also, we know it's prevented because we've prevented it here in our countries. We can also prevent it in the rest of the world as well.